Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where we help you start and grow your podcast while answering any podcasting questions along the way. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Podcast Answers show. We are going to be talking a little bit today about seasons. There we go. Seasons or no seasons in your podcast. But first, if you have not gone out and subscribed to our show on YouTube, definitely do that because it allows you to go and see anytime we go live. We record these live, and we record live on YouTube. We record live on new podcast apps. So you can go to youtube.com/@podcastanswers. Get subscribed there. You can get notified if you hit the bell anytime that we go live, and you can watch us. You can put questions in, and it makes this show a lot more fun because we can answer live questions right away. And you can also listen on a new podcast app at newpodcastapps.com. I like Podverse. That allows you to listen in your podcast app as we go live, as we record. So it's a lot of fun. And I'm hoping to talk a little bit about Podcasting 2.0 in an upcoming episode where we'll be just chatting about Podcasting 2.0, what it is, all of the new things. There's a lot of technical stuff. But first, let's talk about seasons or no seasons in your podcast. So there's really not a hard, fast rule about seasons. And that's one of the things I love about podcasting, because there is no hard and fast rule when it comes to podcasting. You can kind of do podcasting how you want. You can, if you want to do seasons, you can do seasons. By all means, do seasons. If you don't want to do seasons, you don't have to do seasons. That's the great thing about podcasting, is you can do it how you want. There are no necessarily gatekeepers on how you want to do podcasting. If you want to do a solo show, you can do a solo show. If you want to do a guest show, you can do guests. So there's no hard rule when it comes to seasons. If your content leads itself to sections that can be broken up in seasons, then definitely do seasons. They could be definitely good for you. So let's say you have an episode, or your topic is about, you kind of range in topics, but you have a section of topics that go together. And by that, I mean, you may be talking about dogs for a while, several episodes about dogs. You may be then talking about cats. You may be talking then about snakes. Your show could be the pet podcast. And if it's that way where you're talking several episodes about a specific topic, then break it up into seasons. So your seasons would be like season 1, dogs, season 2, cats. And so if you're not a dog person, you can skip that season and kind of break it up like that. Also, another good reason to go into seasons is if you need to have breaks in your content, like taking break for the month of December. Now, if you're just starting your podcast off, I would say don't take a break. Just roll your content out, get it out there to everybody. That way they can get used to you delivering content on a consistent basis, on a consistent schedule. But if you've been going at it for a while, for my other podcasts, I take breaks for the month of December. So that's when our season rolls around. We have a season from January to November, and then we take December off because for us, we're both dudes. The other podcast is called Dudes and Dads Podcast, and we have families, and so December gets super busy for us, and so we like to take breaks on that show, and then that allows us to spend the month of December with our family. Sometimes when we take breaks, we also pre-record content. This last year, we did the 10 Days of Dudemas, which allowed us to go ahead and put every day for 10 days in December, we put out content that was maybe 3 minutes long. And it was just this is what we recommend for a gift guide, a gift buying guide. But our regular episodes were off, and those were bonus content for us. That was bonus. And so if you could listen to it, if you wanted to, you didn't have to, but it was bonus content. So if your content has breaks in it like that, where you want to have a break, you may be talking about the same thing. I mean, for that show, for that podcast, we ended up talking, our topics range greatly. We just help dudes have better community, and we help people tell their stories that we find interesting. And so for us, one day we could be talking about adoption. One day we could be talking about a kid that has a heart defect. And so it ranges from widely. So our topics don't necessarily lend it into seasons, but because we take off content, or because we take off the month of December, we end up having seasons for that reason. Now, one reason you may not want to have seasons is do your listeners even care? Like, does it matter to them what season you're in? I mean, seasons can kind of be a bragging right. I mean, just like episode numbers, right? You can say I am on episode number 600 or 6,000 or whatever. It's kind of a bragging right for you to say this is what the content, this is what we've done podcasting for this long of time. We're on 7 seasons, 10 seasons, whatever. But if it doesn't make sense to your listeners, it may be good just to not do a season. Like if there's not really any good reason to break, like you're not talking about content that you're grouping together. Or, for instance, and again, think of that, like a TV show, like if you're on let's say a Survivor, you have a set of time that you're on a specific location or a specific guests, or in this case, if you did a podcast that you had maybe a co-host for a season and then you moved on to a new co-host, that would be a good reason to break up seasons. So people could look at it and know this is when we're doing this season, and this is when this co-host is on. But again, if your content doesn't necessarily lend itself to having seasons, because really if your guests, I mean not your guests, but your listeners aren't going to care. They don't care what season you're on. They just want to know the content. Then maybe it's a good thing to not have seasons. So it's just, again, one thing that you guys can think about, because again, there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to podcasting. You could you can do what you want, but these are just some things to think about when you're deciding to set your episodes up in seasons. Now, let me caution you, if you start doing seasons or if you stop doing seasons, there could be issues in the way podcast apps show that content. For instance, I know that the podcast apps could be grouping them in seasons. And then I know that Apple Podcasts used to do this, that if you had something where you unseasoned it, sounds like you're making a dish. It took seasons out. So let's say you started doing seasons, or even started without seasons and then decided to go to seasons. It'll have your seasons grouped together, or it did have your seasons grouped together. And then the ones that were not in a season, didn't have a season tag in it, it just put it as an unseason or uncategorized, no season, unknown season with those other ones. So that gets really weird because then it breaks your content up. Your content may go logically in a time, people may want to see it, but it may be putting the newest, latest, biggest episode season up top when you're actually now not doing seasons. And so those content gets lost at the bottom of the list. So those are just some things to think about. If you're going to start with one, stick with it. Don't change in the middle. Keep going with seasons if you're going to do it, unless you're going to go back and create seasons on all of your past episodes, which you can. I mean, that's perfectly fine if you want to go ahead and go back and edit all of your past shows. But again, if you're 600 episodes in, that's a whole, that's an intern type of a thing. You need to hire an intern for that, because who's got time to go back and re-edit all of those past podcast episodes that are out there. So guys, if you need help podcasting, I am more than happy to help you. I want to get you out there. I want you to be able to do your podcast. I'm here for one-on-one consulting. podcastanswers.com/consult will get you, contact. There we go. I don't even know my own site. podcastanswers.com/contact will get you into contact with me, and we can do a one-on-one consult, and I'd be more than happy to get you up and running with your podcast. If you found any value in this podcast, go to podcastanswers.com/buymeacoffee and considering giving back some value to us. You can become a monthly subscriber or a one-time donation, and that helps us produce this show, get better equipment to produce this show, and just help get more experience at things that we can pass along to you. So again, podcastanswers.com/buymeacoffee if you want to support the show, or if you go to newpodcastapps.com, you can see a podcast app that will allow you to send a boostergram to us, small amounts of crypto. So again, that's something new, but you can do it however you want. So guys, with that, thanks again for joining us today.